Hello everyone, and welcome back to part 3 of the cryptid iceberg. This should be the final part of level 1, the sky level of the iceberg. Before we move on to finishing the sky level of the iceberg, I'd like to thank you all for watching, and also thank everyone who has subscribed because we just passed 100 subscribers, so thanks a lot. Slenderman, or Slender, is a character created on the Something Awful forums in 2009 as part of a Photoshop contest. The entity quickly became a popular creepypasta character, with many authors making their own additions to the story, constructing a mythos around the character. Slenderman is an abnormally tall humanoid, ranging from 6 to 14 feet tall. He possesses a featureless, ghost-white face and always wears a black suit. Slenderman has an arsenal of supernatural abilities, ranging from mind-reading, teleportation, and the ability to conjure tendrils from his back. Slenderman lurks in dark forests and stalks those unlucky enough to cross his path, and usually his victims are children. Slenderman stalks his victims, watching them from the shadows until they either mysteriously disappear or lose their sanity. In these stories, some of the victims become Slenderman's proxies after being driven insane, after which they are forced to do his bidding. In Waukesha, Wisconsin, two 12-year-old girls, Anissa Weir and Morgan Geyser, as well as their best friend, 14-year-old Peyton Leutner, became obsessed with the Slenderman mythos and had total faith in his existence. Over the course of several months, the two 6th grade girls hatched a plan to kill Peyton in order to please Slenderman. They finally found the perfect opportunity, a slumber party to celebrate Morgan turning 12. Thinking that they would become servants of Slenderman after Peyton's murder, Anissa and Morgan hoped to escape to Slenderman's mansion, which they were certain was located hundreds of miles north. May 31st, 2014. The three were playing hide-and-seek in the forest of David's Park. Little did Peyton know that this was the end game of their secret plan, and that her best friends were luring her into a trap. Anissa and Morgan pinned Peyton down and stabbed her 19 times in the arms, legs, and torso with a 5-inch long blade. 2 wounds were to major organs, and one missed a major artery of the heart by less than a millimeter. Another went through her diaphragm, cutting into her liver and stomach. Anissa and Morgan told Peyton that they would find help, but never had any intention of doing so. They left their best friend to bleed out in the woods. However, Peyton was able to drag herself to a nearby road, where she was found by a cyclist who quickly called 911. Morgan and Anissa were found walking towards what they believed was Slenderman's mansion, and apprehended. Morgan had told Anissa that if they didn't sacrifice Peyton to Slenderman, their families and loved ones would be killed. Anissa admitted this during police interrogation, and went on to say that she believed her. During her interrogation, Morgan said that she regretted the attack, but that it was necessary to please Slenderman. In the aftermath of this case, Morgan was diagnosed with schizophrenia, which her father also suffered from. This hereditary mental illness was kept secret from her by her parents, who wanted her to feel normal. This horrendous crime is known as the Slenderman stabbing. Though Slenderman was created on the internet, the belief is powerful enough to cause real bloodshed. Golems. Mostly originating from European or Jewish folklore, golems are creatures made of stone or earth and usually animated by an outside force such as magic. I was able to dig up a modern encounter of an animate being made of stone, which is not from older folklore. And this one is pretty weird. In the summer of 1970, in Hot Springs, Arkansas, Roger Sheffield and his 2 friends, Terry and Bob, all 3 college sophomores, decided to go waste a few hours together. At 7 a.m., they arrived at the parking lot of the Hot Springs Boys Club, which overlooked a complex of 4 baseball fields. After 2 hours passed, it began getting dark and they decided to leave. Quote, "When we decided to leave the place, We all got into the car, and we passed the rear security light. One of those lights that seems to make everything appear a lavender color, Roger said. At that light, Roger and Terry talked Bob into stopping the car for a bathroom break before they finally left. After leaking their lizards, Roger states, quote, "As I turned around to face the direction of the trail, which crested the driveway from below, near a 15-foot lone pine tree next to the light, suddenly, a very large form rose from the lower fields, coming up, not as if walking or stepping, but more like floating up from below. The two men froze. Quote, "This thing looked like someone had concreted a very, very large man in a diving suit, bell helmet and all, and contoured the head into the shoulders as if there were no neck, no facial features, only smooth gray but lavender tinted from the guard light." The creature stopped, and Roger felt that it was because this being noticed himself and Terry standing at the top of the hill. Quote, "It appeared that I was only looking at the thing from the waist up. It was almost a third as tall as the 15-foot tree next to the trail, and at least 3 feet across at the shoulders. The thing appeared to be potentially some 10 feet tall." The two men then broke free from their shock and ran back to Bob's car and escaped. Quote, "We'll never know what that thing was," Roger said. "The only description I've had for it all these years is a golem, a mud man, because that's exactly what it looked like, an enormous clay-like figure rising up from the dark before us, featureless, massive, and unlike anything I've ever seen since that night. Occasionally, I see drawings made by those who have been abducted by extraterrestrials, or have had close encounters of some kind, and ever so rarely, I'll see something akin to what we saw that night at the Hot Springs Boys Club. The implications of this are insane. What exactly are golems? What are these creatures that people have been seeing for so long? Could they be not of this world?" Griffin. In mythology, the griffin is used as a metaphor for the ultimate beast or predator, given that it is made of the greatest land and sky predators, the eagle and the lion. If you remember in part 1, we went over specific sightings of gigantic birds, such as the Belvedere thunderbird. If such a creature existed, then it's possible that maybe griffins or something akin to griffins could exist also. Vampires. Tales of nocturnal, undead, blood-sucking monsters are some of humanity's oldest fears. These monsters have burned themselves into our collective consciousness. Vlad Tepes, or Vlad Dracula the Impaler, was a warlord who would impale his victims on iron rods outside of his castle, where some victims would survive in absolute agony for days on end before finally succumbing to their wounds. Vlad would also allegedly drink the blood of his enemies and also dip his bread in it. Vampires are commonly thought to originate in Romania, but this just isn't true. Though there are older tales of similar undead monsters from across the world, our modern idea of vampires originates in medieval Serbia. Austrian forces returning from conquests in Ottoman Serbia in the early 1700s brought back vampire stories, which is then circulated throughout Europe. The word vampiri entered Western languages from Serbia in the late 1720s. In 1725, Petar Blagojević lived and died in the village of Kisiljevo, Serbia. His wife, now widowed, claimed that her husband knocked on her door after the funeral, demanding his shoes before attempting to strangle her. Blagojević remained active over the next 9 nights, attacking 9 more villagers. On waking, each victim reported that Blagojević had laid himself upon them and throttled them. After suffering a mysterious, quote, 24-hour illness, all of Blagojević's victims died. However, the locals knew that they would become vampires. Arndt Paul was a Serbian guerrilla fighter who served in the Imperial Austrian Army and fought against the Ottoman forces that controlled Turkish Serbia. During his time in the military, It's said that he was attacked by a vampire. During the fight, the vampire managed to sink its fangs into the mortal man before he successfully slayed the vampire. Arnott knew that he too would die and rise again as a vampire, unless he went to the vampire's original grave and ate from the earth of its grave and smeared the vampire's blood on himself, which is exactly what he did. Arnott believed that he had saved his soul from the vampire's curse. However, it seems that he wasn't that lucky. After returning from war in 1727, Arnott married and settled down in a village called Medvegia. The same year, Arnott broke his neck and died in a tragic horse-drawn cart accident. Roughly 1 month later, 4 people came forward, claiming that they were attacked by the undead Arnott. All 4 of Arnott's victims died shortly after. It's also believed that at some point, Arnott fed from the blood of cattle, perhaps before attacking human victims and trying to stave off his vampiric hunger. The villagers were advised by a military official who claimed to have dealt with vampires before to open his grave. They saw that the corpse was, quote, undecomposed, with all the indications of an arch-vampire. They found that fresh blood flowed from his eyes, nose, mouth, and ears, that the shirt, the covering, and the coffin were all completely bloody, that the old nails on his hands and feet, along with the skin, had fallen off and new ones had grown. His body was red. His hair, nails, and beard had all grown again. They concluded that Arnott was a vampire. They drove a stake through his heart, and allegedly, he reacted by shrieking as if he was still alive, groaning and bleeding. They then decapitated him and burned his corpse. They then did the same to Arnott's victims to prevent them from becoming vampires as well. 5 years after the death of Arnott, 17 people died in under 3 months from alleged vampire attacks in the same village. On December 12, 1731, the Austrian emperor ordered that an inquiry should be carried out. It was believed that Arnott was the original cause of these new vampires because it was believed that Arnott fed from the blood of cattle in the area. The emperor's inquiry led to one of the most important sources for the history of vampirism, a medical report, a visum et repertum, meaning seen and discovered, was written and attested by military surgeons in Serbia based on this case of vampirism. It was signed by 5 officers, and 3 of them were doctors, and all of them should have been extremely familiar with corpses, having served in the army that had fought and defeated the Turks between 1714 and 1718, though most of these traits of vampirism are now known as normal processes of decomposition. There were many other similar cases where it was believed that people were rising from the grave, becoming vampires, but oftentimes this was because the villagers insisted on being buried next to the church, and eventually, as the space filled up, the graves became shallower and shallower, and something as simple as a heavy rainfall could cause corpses to rise up from the grave. Sava Sivanovic is one of the most ancient and feared vampires. Even modern-day Serbians living in the village of Zorazhe fear him. According to legend, Sivanovic would murder and drink the blood of anyone who came to use his watermill. Over the years, the fear of this vampire kept a powerful grip on the villagers, who refused to go anywhere near the mill at night and forbid tourists from going so. Quote, "We were welcoming tourists, but only during the day. Nobody ever overnighted there," said the man whose family owned the mill for over 60 years. In 2012, Savanovic's lair collapsed, reinvigorating the old fears of the ancient vampire. Quote, "We were too scared to repair it, not to disturb Sava Savanovic. It's even worse now that it collapsed due to lack of repair." After the collapse, the villagers began to fear that Savanovic may have been awakened and is now once again on the prowl in the forested mountains of western Serbia, the Pope Lick Monster. In Louisville, Kentucky, there exists a railroad bridge 100 feet tall that overlooks Pope Lick Creek. Kind of a weird name. This is said to be the home of a deadly beast, the Pope Lick Monster, or the Goat Man, a dreadful chimera with the body of a man and the head, horns, and greasy hair of a goat. According to some legends, the Pope Lick Monster uses its powers of hypnosis or voice mimicry to lure in its victims, only for them to be killed by an oncoming train, reduced to roadkill. In other legends, the Goat Man jumps from the bridge and onto cars which pass under. There are multiple different origin stories for the Pope Lick Monster. In one tale, the Goat Man was a mutant human-goat hybrid, which was captured and put into a freak show. In another version, the creature escaped after a train derailed on the trestle. Another version claims that the monster is really the twisted reincarnation of a farmer who sacrificed goats in exchange for dark powers, Satan, Lucifer, or Baphomet. Several people have died on or near the train bridge in search of the Goat Man. On April 23, 2016, a young couple climbed onto the bridge and decided to hunt for the monster. While walking the train tracks, the train came barreling towards them. They had nowhere to go. The 26-year-old woman was hit dead on by the train and passed away. Her boyfriend survived by hanging on to the side of the bridge. In 1994, a man was killed by the train after his ATV overturned on the trestle, trapping him on the track. For every entry on the iceberg, I've been including the stories told by those who have seen these cryptids. However, there are no witness reports of this creature. Does this tell us that the Goat Man is mere folklore, or that none of his victims have lived to tell their tale? Krampus. Krampus is a horned, demonic, goat-like humanoid which acts as a sort of counterpart to Santa Claus or Saint Nicholas in Germanic and Austrian folklore. Krampus exists to frighten children and punish them. He is hairy, usually brown or black, and has the cloven hooves and horns of a goat. He is sometimes described as a wicked, hairy devil. His long, pointed tongue lolls out, and he has menacing fangs. Krampus carries chains, thought to symbolize the binding of the devil by the Christian Church. He thrashes the chains for dramatic effect. In some tales, he wields only birch rods, while in others, he wields a pitchfork or a whip to attack children with. Sometimes, Krampus appears with a sack or basket strapped to his back to cart off evil children for drowning, eating, or to transport to hell. Krampus's actual origin dates back farther than Christianity, and it wasn't until the 17th century that he was linked to Santa Claus. It's believed by folklorists that Krampus comes from a pagan supernatural being that became assimilated with the Christian concept of the devil. In pagan tradition, predating Christianity, people would masquerade as a devilish figure known as Percht, a two-legged humanoid goat with a giraffe-like neck wearing animal furs. Leprechauns. Leprechauns are a staple of Irish folklore, commonly described as resembling a very small human with red hair and green clothing. In many legends, they spend their spare time making shoes, and if you catch one, they'll grant you wishes or riches from their pot of gold. Floridian marine reptiles. I'm not exactly sure what this entry on the iceberg is referring to, but many Floridians report seeing unidentified reptiles off the coast. These reptiles are said to have crocodilian heads, 2 front fins, and a long, trident-shaped tail. Florida is ranked number 1 worldwide in invasive reptile species, so if nothing else, it's highly likely that Floridians can encounter reptiles that are alien to their area, even if they aren't exactly sea monsters. Trolls. In Old Norse sources, trolls are said to be small humanoids which dwell in isolated mountains, rocks, and caves. Trolls sometimes live together in groups and are almost never welcoming of humans. In later Scandinavian mythos, trolls are said to be directly hostile towards humans and even have a hunger for human flesh. Trolls are said to possess supernatural strength, which allows them to crush human skulls with ease and even rip humans limb from limb. Luckily for us lowly mortals, trolls are said to be dim-witted and turn to stone if they touch sunlight. The unicorn is a legendary creature seen in myths and stories for thousands of years by multiple different cultures. It is usually depicted as a white horse with a long straight horn. The unicorn was mentioned by ancient Greek writers such as Pliny the Younger, although the unicorn became much more popular in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, commonly described as an extremely wild and rare creature and a symbol of purity and grace. In bestiaries, the unicorn horn was described as having the power to heal sickness and purify poisoned water. Jinn, a spirit from Islamic folklore, which in the cosmic hierarchy are below angels and devils. Contrary to popular belief, jinn can be good or evil. It's said that jinn are spirits of fire and sometimes wind, and can take on any form they choose, animal or human, and can be of any size. They're commonly described as shadowy ghosts with no individual structure, similar to sightings of shadow people. Jinn are said to possess magical powers, which enable them to shapeshift, move and fly very quickly, enter human bodies, and cause illnesses. And there are some legends of humans attempting to make jinn their allies through use of magic. Jinn are said to dwell in all conceivable inanimate objects, such as stones, trees, ruins, underneath the earth, in the air, and even in fire. They possess the bodily needs of humans and can even be killed, but they are free from all physical restraints. Jinn delight in punishing humans for any harm done to them, intentionally or unintentionally, and are said to be responsible for many diseases and all kinds of accidents. Belief in jinn was common in early Arabia, where they were thought to inspire poets. Leviathan, a gigantic sea serpent said to encircle or make up the foundations of the earth, according to Abrahamic faith. Many scholars believe that the concept of the Leviathan comes from Tiamat from Buddhism and Jormungandr, otherwise known as the world serpent from Norse mythology. Rock, usually described as a white or tan-colored bird, its wingspan was reported to be as large as 48 feet in length, complete with feathers as big as palm trees. The rock was so big that its eggs were said to be over 150 feet in circumference, and according to Arabic tradition, the creature would only land at the center of the world. In the 13th century, the explorer Marco Polo stated, "It was for all the world like an eagle, but one indeed of enormous size, so big in fact that its quills were 12 paces long and thick in proportion. It is so strong that it will seize an elephant in its talons and carry him high into the air and drop him so that he is smashed to pieces. Having so killed him, the bird swoops down and eats him at leisure." Is it possible that a bird this large and powerful could have existed at some point? Azwang. The Azwang is a creature from Filipino folklore and is described as an inherently evil, vampiric, werewolf-type creature, and appears in many myths in different forms. It's really an umbrella term for various shape-shifting evil creatures in Filipino folklore, such as vampires, ghouls, witches, viscera suckers, and werebeasts. Spanish colonists noted that the Azwang was the most feared among the mythical creatures of the Philippines, even in the 16th century. Capiz is said to be the home of the Azwang. In the 1950s, the American CIA used the Azwang as a weapon of psychological terror. During the events of World War II, the Huks were guerrilla soldiers who fought on the side of the Allied powers against Japanese invaders on Philippine soil. The U.S. granted the Philippines independence in 1946, just 10 months after the end of World War II. After World War II, American forces entered the Philippines and double-crossed the Huks. Though some guerrilla militias and American forces saw the Huks' methods as terroristic and needlessly murderous, the Huks expected to be treated as allies for fighting the Japanese, who the Americans obviously weren't fans of at the time. But the Huks were instead forcibly disarmed, charged with treason, and in some cases slaughtered. Once an ally to the U.S. forces during the war, the Huks took up arms once again after the war when they were expelled from Congress by then-President Manuel Roxas. The Hucks opposed the controversial Bell Trade Act, which gave the U.S. vast control over Philippine industries and economy. The CIA was eventually brought in to face the Hucks rebellion, and, as they do, the CIA thought of a dastardly psychological warfare technique. CIA officers killed Hucks, drained their blood, put puncture marks on their necks, and left their corpses hanging upside down to scare the superstitious and sympathetic townsfolk. The same pattern of holes, animal bites, and carcasses were seen across the countryside in quick succession. It rattled those would-be sympathizers so much that they were afraid to join the meetings held by the movement. Support waned until the Hucks stopped activities in 1954, and their leader surrendered. Bunyip, a nocturnal creature or water spirit from Aboriginal Australian mythology, which dwells in caves, lakes, rivers, and swamps. Bunyip is translated by Aboriginal Australians today as devil or evil spirit. It's said that the bunyip is primarily carnivorous, preying upon human women and children, though some are described as herbivores. However, these are the only characteristics that most can agree on. Because of this, physical descriptions and artistic depictions of the bunyip vary massively. 60% of all sightings resemble seals or bears, and 20% of sightings are of long-necked creatures with small heads. The remaining descriptions are utterly horrifying. Mermaid, usually depicted as having the upper body of a woman and the lower body of a fish. Christopher Columbus wrote of an alleged encounter with a mermaid. Columbus reported seeing 3, quote, female forms which rose high out of the water, but were not as beautiful as they were represented. Also, the logbook of Blackbeard records that he instructed his crew on several voyages to steer away from charted waters, which he called enchanted, for fear of merfolk or mermaids. Ahul, a giant bat or flying primate, said to live in the deepest parts of the jungles of Java and can be found across most of Indonesia. The creature is described as having an ape-like face, large eyes, red-skinned leathery wings, oversized claws on its forearms, and a coat of thick gray fur. It's said to have a wingspan of 12 feet, which is twice the size of the largest known bat, which is the flying fox. The Ahul was first reported by Dr. Ernest Bartels in 1925. The doctor was exploring a waterfall on the slopes of the Salak Mountains when a giant, unknown bat, the Ahul, flew directly overhead. In a later expedition in 1927, around 11:30, the doctor encountered the Ahul again. He was laying in bed inside of his thatched house, close to a river in western Java, listening to the sounds of the jungle, when suddenly he heard a very different sound coming from directly overhead. This cry is what gave the creature its namesake, air rods, also known as solar entities or skyfish. These mysterious objects appear in skies all over the planet. Skyfish are thought to swim in the air like fish swim through water at incredible speeds. Skyfish are picked up by cameras and cell phones all over the world. However, these artifacts appear naturally in video and outdoor photography as a result of an optical illusion due to motion blur, after-image trails of flying insects and their wing beats. Here, you can see the phenomenon reproduced by a long exposure image of moths flying around a light. Despite this, there are some paranormal researchers who believe that there is more to this phenomena, that these skyfish are more than elongated insects. Some witnesses claim to have seen skyfish with their own eyes, some up to several feet long. Air rods are connected to other stories of atmospheric beasts or sky jellyfish. Alaskan ice monster. 2 employees of the Alaskan Bureau of Land Management captured this video of an alleged cryptid swimming in the Chena River in Fairbanks, Alaska. The creature looks to be 12 to 15 feet long. Experts from the Alaska Management of Fish and Game claim that the creature was nothing biological, just junk. Specifically, the Bureau stated the thing was, quote, fragile ice stuck to a rope that is probably caught on a bridge pier. The natural phenomenon of fragile ice occurs during bursts of cold. Instead of forming a crust, The small and super cool discs mix into flowing rivers and streams, giving the water a slushy appearance. When the Alaskan agency employees returned to the scene, the area had warmed, and the thing vanished, along with the river ice and snow. Phantom cats. This refers to sightings of big cats far outside their home range. Phantom cats are most widely reported in the United Kingdom. Some of the sightings are believed to have been the result of big cat owners releasing their animals in the wild after the introduction of the Dangerous Wild Animals Act in 1976. This act covers many species, such as primates, carnivores, larger or venomous reptiles, dangerous spiders, and scorpions. Big cats, as well as hybrids between wild and domestic species, such as Bengal cats or wolf dogs. However, given that these sightings are persisting, it's unlikely that this could explain all of them. One of the latest sightings was reported by a 59-year-old office worker. Quote, "I was in the living room and saw something blurry outside through the living room door. I grabbed my phone and took a picture. I guess it remains a mystery. I enjoyed the speculation about it all." You can see the photo that she captured on screen now. This cat appears to be an exotic species such as puma, lynx, or leopard. Her sighting is one of 200 reported in the Cornwall region over the last 13 years. However, sightings have also taken place in Canada, Australia, Germany, France, Spain, Switzerland, Ireland, New Zealand, Finland, Denmark, Hawaii, Italy, Luxembourg, and the United States. Sushinoko is a legendary Japanese snake. Its most distinguishing characteristic is its wide midsection and small rat-like tail. The Japanese word for Sushinoko means child of hammer or child of dirt. The dirt child name may come from its appearance, which is sometimes described as entirely black, including the eyes. Other Sushinoko are described as brown, blending in with a forest floor covered in leaves. Its most noted ability is that it can grasp its tail in its jaws and roll after its prey, creating a wheel, which is also inadvertently creating the Ouroboros symbol. The Sushinoko is also said to have a remarkable jumping ability, able to leap 3 feet. Sushinoko sightings date back 1,400 years, even referenced in the Kojiki, the oldest book about the history of Japan. These creatures are said to be found in remote locations like mountains and forests, specifically those near Shikoku, Honshu, the Kyushu Islands, and on the Korean Peninsula. The government of Yoshi Okayama once offered a 20 million yen reward for the successful capture of a Sushinoko. In June 1994, a man named Kazuaki Noda and his wife reported having come across a huge snake with a thick body like a beer bottle and a head being described as like that of a tortoise. On May 8, 2000, a farmer named Sugi Tanaka reported having come across 2 metallic-colored snakes with tails like rats. In the same year, in June, a woman reported a Sushinoko swimming along a river. She describes her experience as follows. "I was surprised. I just pointed at it and asked, 'Who are you? Who are you?' It didn't answer me, but just stared. It had a round face and didn't take its eyes off me. I can still see the eyes now. They were big and round and looked like they were floating on the water. I've lived over 80 years, but I'd never seen anything like that in my life." Mohelium bimbe. This creature falls into a category of cryptid known as a neo-dinosaur, modern living dinosaurs. Mohelium bimbe originates from Central Africa. The creature's name is Lingala for, quote, "one who stops the flow of rivers." It supposedly lives in the Congo River Basin, sometimes described as a living creature, sometimes as a spirit. There have been many expeditions into the Congo with the goal of finding Mohelium bimbe, though none have been successful at proving its existence. In many cases, accounts of the creature were actually propagated by locals who wanted Westerners to come and invest. Some of the expeditions searching for the creature had set out with an unscientific bias in mind. The most reasonable and agreed upon explanation is that the creature is a legend based on the black rhinoceros, a species once common to Central Africa, where the stories of the creature originated. One interesting theory is that if you believe in ghosts, that these neo-dinosaur type cryptids could be the spirits of dinosaurs. Pennsylvanian white Bigfoot. Though most Sasquatch sightings take place in the northwestern United States, there are sightings of similar bipedal apes in many places across the globe. This creature was first sighted in Blakesley, Pennsylvania, 1970. According to eyewitness Annette B., she saw a creature which stood between 6 and 7 feet tall, with a broad chest, a long neck, and a coat of dirtied white fur. Annette went on to describe its face as, quote, its eyes were dark and spaced far apart. Its hair covered the lower half of its face. There was pinkish skin around the eyes and the forehead. It looked like its hair was a little longer on its head and hanging over its forehead like bangs. 3 years later, September 27th, 1973, 2 girls were walking outside in Beaver County, Pennsylvania at 9:30 p.m. when an 8-foot-tall being covered with white fur and red glowing eyes ran into the nearby woods. The humanoid was carrying a large glowing orb in its hands. The girls ran off hysterically into their house. The father of one of the girls then went into the woods in search of the creature and stayed there for over an hour. The same year, a glowing orb lands near Uniontown, Pennsylvania, and 2 Bigfoot-type creatures are observed in the pasture at the same time. A woman fired her shotgun at one of the creatures only a few feet away, and it disappeared out of sight. At the same time, a luminous object hovered over the nearby woods. In July of 2008, a local news station in Pennsylvania ran a story which talked about the, quote, white, possibly albino creature after receiving an anonymous email. It was said to be some sort of animal about 6 to 7 feet tall, covered in all white fur. The email specifically mentioned a wooded area in Carbondale near a mine reclamation site. Mine reclamation is the process of restoring land that has been mined to an economically usable condition. 2 years later, in 2010, people began to report sightings of a white juvenile Bigfoot in Carbondale, Pennsylvania. People in the area began to hear strange noises and disturbances coming from the woods. One man heard strange noises coming from the forest next to his home for 2 weeks before summoning the courage to investigate. Carrying a flashlight and a camera, he ventured forth and was able to capture some bizarre video footage which can be seen on screen now. For 1 full second, a creature was caught on camera. If this is a hoax, this is definitely a good costume. YouTuber Bigfoot Tony enhanced the footage so that you can glean more from the darkness. Assuming that this is real, the most popular explanation is that what people are seeing is an elderly Sasquatch whose hair has gone gray with age. My favorite aspect of cryptid or alien encounters is the element of high strangeness. We've talked about high strangeness before. In case you don't remember, this is when multiple unexplained or paranormal events coincide with one another, and the 1973 encounter is definitely bizarre. What was the orb the creature was carrying? Why was a UFO seen just after the creature vanished? This encounter is used by some as fuel for the theory that Sasquatch could be much more than an undiscovered great ape. Homunculus, meaning little man, is said to be a humanoid creature that is a fully formed, microscopic human adult that is formed when a sperm is injected into a chicken's egg. The homunculus was popularized in 16th century alchemy as an alchemical ritual coined by Paracelsus, alchemist and the father of toxicology. To manufacture a homunculus, Paracelsus stated that the needed spagyric, which is a term probably coined by Paracelsus, implying an alchemical process using semen. Substances should be sealed in a glass vial and placed in horse dung to digest for 40 days. At the end of this time, something will begin to live and move in the bottle. This is sometimes a man, said Paracelsus, but a man who has no body and is transparent. Known as the wickedest man in the world, Aleister Crowley wrote a novel that deals with the production of a kind of homunculus he called a moonchild. Crowley wrote of a magic rite to induce a particular type of spirit to incarnate in an embryo, which a woman would then carry until birth. More recently, many people were exposed to the concept of the homunculus by a bizarre Russian video that went viral. A Russian man named Korny created several videos, the first of which has over 21 million views, detailing his alleged experiments into creating the homunculus. The creature he sired at one point spits a mysterious liquid at him, and Korny smashes the homunculus with a book. Though these videos are very bizarre, they have been proven to be hoaxes. Bear Lake Monster. Bear Lake, on the Utah-Idaho border, may be home to another sea monster. One team of folklorists stated that, quote, "It is reported to resemble a serpent, both legs about 18 inches long, on which it marauds along the shoreline." One article reported that the creature had a, quote, "large undulating body with about 30 feet of exposed surface of a light cream color, moving swiftly through the water at a distance of 3 miles from the point of observation." Others have reported seeing a monster-like creature which went faster than a locomotive and had a head variously described as being similar to that of a cow, otter, crocodile, or a walrus, minus the tusks. Its size was reported to be at least 50 feet long, and not less than 40. Some sightings even spoke of a second member of the species, and smaller creatures as well. The origin of the Bear Lake Monster goes back to a series of articles written by Joseph C. Rich, a Mormon colonizer at Bear Lake. He wrote several articles detailing the accounts of locals who had seen the creature, though he had not seen it himself. This story was written in 1868 by Joseph C. Rich and was sent to the local newspaper. It goes as follows, quote, "The Indians have a tradition concerning a strange, serpent-like creature inhabiting the waters of Bear Lake, which they say carried off some of their braves many moons ago. Since then, they will not sleep close to the lake, neither will they swim in it, nor let their squaws and papooses bathe in it." However, 26 years later, Joseph C. Rich finally admitted that the story was a, quote, "wonderful first-class lie." The Beast of Bray Road. In Elkhorn, Wisconsin, there exists a country road named Bray Road, which is where the creature was first seen. The Beast of Bray Road is probably the most well-known werewolf or dogman type creature, though there are many dogman encounters in other locations. Sightings of this creature were reported to the local animal control and the police, and the law enforcement officials kept a file on the Beast of Bray Road. In 1989, Indreezy, the manager of a local lounge, was driving during the night when she came across a strange figure on the side of the road. Its arms were bent, gripping roadkill with long, sharp claws. It was the size of a man and had brownish-gray fur with the face of a wolf. The creature simply stared at her as she passed, its eyes reflecting her headlights. Journalist Linda Godfrey, who was the first to cover the Beast of Bray Road case, sketched Indreezy's encounter. Indreezy described the creature as, quote, "satanic," and stated that when she returned home, books began flying off the shelves. When she reported her story to law enforcement, an officer visited her and stated that something, quote, "unusual" happened, but never said what. In 1992, a teenager named Tom Richta reported that he saw the creature twice while driving to a campground near Bray Road on Highway 6. While he was driving, he hit something which he thought was a mailbox, though he was unsure because it was a foggy night. Richter began to reverse his car when a, quote, "long, odd-shaped arm reached in towards him through his open window. He said its belly was on top of the car, so he never saw its face, but he did see large claws and fur." The same night, a truck driver in the area wrecked his semi when a similar creature crossed the road. Again, assuming that this is real, The Beast of Bray Road could be one of the many dogmen type cryptids which are reported all around America and the world. Even the ancient Greeks recorded in their histories a race of people they called the Cyanocephali, meaning men with the head of dogs, who are said to have their own civilization and society just as we do. And with that, we're finally done with level 1 of the cryptid iceberg. This level had a lot of the more well-known creatures as well as sightings, so I don't know if I'll make the remaining levels as long as part 1. But if you enjoyed and you like the long-form content, please let me know. Please subscribe if you haven't already. And again, I'd just like to thank you for watching. It means a lot.